Pentagon says an Iranian-made drone killed an American contractor and wounded 5 U.S. service members after it struck a base in northeast Syria. President Joe Biden responding with airstrikes against groups affiliated with Iran's Revolutionary Guard in Syria. And you can see ambulances rushing to that scene and what looks like a burning building off to the side. The U.S. still has roughly 900 troops on the ground in Syria to help stamp out ISIS. Just yesterday, their commander testifying to Congress about how Iran is using proxy militias to attack American soldiers with drones and rockets.
So let's go to our national security reporter, Natasha Bertrand. She joins us live at the Pentagon. Natasha, good morning to you. This breaking overnight, the U.S. military says it's ready to respond, not just to this, but to any additional Iranian attacks if this continues to escalate.
That's right, Poppy. And Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin did issue a statement last night saying that he authorized this strike after President Biden ordered it in response to a series of attacks by these of groups affiliated with Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps against U.S. personnel in Syria. This is not the first time that the U.S. has conducted these kinds of strikes, but it is these kinds of attacks are increasing, and the U.S. says that it's going to respond in a proportional way. President Joe Biden ordering a U.S. airstrike in eastern Syria Thursday after U.S. intelligence assessed that an Iranian-origin drone killed an American contractor and wounded 5 U.S. service members and another U.S. contractor. Biden authorized the strike, quote, against facilities used by groups affiliated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said in a statement. The Department of Defense said it, quote, took proportionate and deliberate action intended to limit the risk of escalation and minimize casualties. The U.S. military maintains approximately 900 U.S. troops in Syria, some of which are there as part of a coalition to defeat ISIS. But those forces are often under attack by Iranian proxies.
Iran's vast and deeply resourced proxy forces spread instability throughout the region and threaten our regional partners.
The commander of U.S. Central Command said in a statement following the strike, quote, we are postured for scalable options in the face of any additional Iranian attacks. Testifying on Capitol Hill Thursday, Kurilla said that Iranian proxies have carried out attacks on U.S. forces in the Middle East 78 times since the beginning of 2021.
So what Iran does to hide its hand is they use Iranian proxies. That's either UAVs or rockets to be able to attack our forces in either Iraq or Syria.
Are these considered acts of war by Iran?
They are being done by the Iranian proxies, is what I would tell you, Congressman.
The Biden administration has carried out multiple airstrikes against militias affiliated with Iran following previous attacks on U.S. facilities in the region. Biden's first known military action was a strike in February 2021 after rocket attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq. Now, adding to this concern is yet another thing that Kurilla, the commander of U.S. Central Command, told Congress last week, which is that today, Iran possesses the largest and most diverse missile arsenal in the Middle East with thousands of ballistic and cruise missiles. And we should note that 2 of those wounded service members from the strike on Thursday were treated on site, but 3 additional service members and that U.S. contractor were actually medically evacuated to coalition medical facilities in Iraq. Poppy, Don.
Really significant overnight. Natasha, thank you very much for that reporting from the Pentagon. Don.
Thank you. We're very lucky to have our military analyst and retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton to walk us through that. Colonel, thank you so much. Listen, so the first strike happening in the Northeast, and then just south of that is where Biden authorized that strike back again. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, Don, good morning. So basically, with the first strike that the Iranians conducted, the Iranian proxies conducted, I should say, what we're looking at here is in the northeastern part of Syria, the U.S. maintains a major presence with Kurdish forces. So this is a vestige of the work that we did against ISIS to destroy that entity. And of course, there's still elements that exist there. What happened was the strike occurred on the U.S. facility, and that ended up killing the contractor and wounding the 5 soldiers and the other contractor. So with that, you see that the Iranian proxies are working very much in conjunction with Iran. And it's also something to note that when you look at the way in which this happened, you can see this happening right after Iran and Saudi Arabia patched up their relationship. with China's help. So there's a lot that's going on here, a lot to unpack. But the basic idea is that the U.S. then responded after this strike occurred, and the Deir ez-Zor on the map that you have by you, Don, that was where that Iranian group was actually located. So the attack that the U.S. conducted was right there in more or less in the east central part of the country.
Are you expecting the U.S. military to respond further?
I think this is it for the moment. But what would happen, if the Iranian proxies decided to move forward with some other attacks, then you can expect that Central Command, the U.S. Central Command, would be responding in kind. So they've basically said that they would use proportionate force anytime that something like this happened. And this is a response after about 80 attacks that have occurred since the beginning of 2021.
As we've been reporting, there's still U.S. personnel there. The U.S. intel says that the strike was carried out by these Iranian proxies that you mentioned in the region. What more do we know about where they are and the threat that they pose to the U.S. military, to the U.S. personnel?
Right. So most of these groups are located in the eastern and central parts of Syria. There are some that are located in the western part of the country. A lot of the fighting that was going on in the Aleppo region, for example, Iranian proxies were involved in that in the Syrian civil war. So these elements are really throughout the country of Syria, and they can turn and attack any forces, whether it's Syrian defense forces, democratic forces that are aligned with us, or the Kurds, or some other entity, including the U.S. forces that are there.
Yeah, just last Thursday, the top U.S. military general for the Middle East testified before Congress that Iran is significantly more military capable than ever. Let's listen, and then I'll get your response. Here it is.
Today, Iran is exponentially more capable than they were just 5 years ago. Today, Iran possesses the largest and most diverse missile arsenal in the Middle East, thousands of ballistic and cruise missiles, many capable of striking anywhere in the Middle East. Iran also maintains the largest and most capable UAV force in the region.
So Iranian proxies have carried out attacks on U.S. forces in the Middle East 78 times since the beginning of 2021. What are your concerns, Colonel?
So what this shows is that there's a real proliferation of arms in the Middle East, and Iran is the main culprit in this case. And what they're doing in order to protect the identity of who's doing this, at least protected initially, is to give a lot of these weapons to proxy forces so that they can use what's called plausible deniability. In other words, they can wash their hands of whatever happened and say it wasn't us, even though it really was them. So this is very concerning because it really directly impacts American interests anywhere in the Middle East. It really impacts the ability of the Kurds, for example, to maintain a relative peace in their region, and it puts at risk any type of peace agreement that was reached in the Syrian civil war. So this is something that is very dangerous and could explode at any time.
Yeah. That is Cedric Leighton, Colonel Cedric Leighton. A little bit later on, we're going to have John Kirby. He's going to join us from the White House. Thank you, Colonel.